Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our 25th conversation on issues affecting regional, rural and remote Australia, particularly in this time of COVID. My name is Kate Charters and I'm the chair of the National Steering Committee for SEGRA, which is the acronym for Sustainable Economic Growth for Regional Australia. SEGRA was established more than 20 years ago to ensure a voice for regional Australia. And SEGRA is about assisting regional, rural and remote Australia to source and identify the techniques, skills and issues they need to address to achieve successful economic growth and development. So we're very proud to be bringing this webinar to you. We're fully subscribed, which is great. It won't be possible to have people talk during the webinar, but there is a chat box on the bottom right-hand corner. And I strongly encourage you to use this to have input, both in terms of questions, but also if you've got information about your own circumstances that you would like to share, pop that in there. So there's a chat box and a Q&A box. The webinar is being recorded and it will be on available on our SEGRA website on Monday. So welcome everyone to our latest conversation, and I'm very much delighted to be welcoming Rachel Whiting and Megan Dixon from RDA Riverina and RDA Orana respectively. Regional Australia is often challenged in attracting and retaining a skilled workforce, and both RDA Riverina and RDA Orana have established programs for growing their regions, and so we're very fortunate to be hearing firsthand some stuff that's happening on the ground in regions. Rachel has lived in regional communities in New South Wales, Western Australia and Queensland throughout her professional career. And her passion and enthusiasm for development in regional and rural communities is evidenced in the success stories of the organisations she's worked for and in partnership with. Rachel has worked extensively with not-for-profits, both as a board member and as management. In her spare time, Rachel has also been breeding horses for the Olympic disciplines for 20 years and is involved in arts practice and facilitation. Rachel's an adjunct professional staff member at Charles Sturt University, a Fellow of Leadership in Western Australia, holds a Masters of Communication from Charles Sturt University, a Graduate Certificate in Animal Studies from UQ, and a Bachelor of Education majoring in Visual Arts and English from QUT. So that's an impressive background, Rachel. Megan. Passionate about regional Australia, Megan has lived and worked in the Northern Territory, regional Queensland and New South Wales, holding various positions that have been focused on regional economic development. And in fact, Megan, this is your second time speaking on this webinar, so thank you very much. Megan's now the Director of Regional Development Orana, based in Dubbo. And Megan has spent the last 4 years focused on workforce development and labour shortages, working strategically and through partnerships on the push-pull ecosystem that drives skills and labour shortages in inland Australia. Well, you've been champions in this space, so thank you very much for joining us. And I'll now hand over to you.
Thank you very much. And I've got to say, it's funny because when you said SEGRA is 20 years old, you know, I think I was involved with SEGRA way back when, which I hate to say shows my age. And we hosted SEGRA in Townsville in the very early days, and I hadn't realised it had been that long because I don't think of it that way. But
no, the 70s were only 30 years ago, remember?
And I think that the congratulations to you with SEGRA and your sustainability in terms of what you've been doing, and it's really good to be a part of this. So for the audience, Rachel and I have kind of had a pre-discussion, and we do work fairly collaboratively and we share ideas. And what we thought was that we would kickstart with just a little bit around what we both see as what are driving the jobs needs in here. And Rachel actually coined the hashtag that we've adopted as well, which is more jobs than people. So Rachel, for you, what's driving the changes for you?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Yes, more jobs than people. It makes people stand up and listen, I think, because nobody really believes that's the case, but it is in the Riverina. The biggest driver of this is an ageing population. We have people in skilled positions who are retiring. So these are tradespeople, managers within all sorts of different businesses. And you could think, oh yeah, well, that's just a normal thing, and why does that create such a job gap? But it actually does when so much of your population is in that age bracket. So there are massive opportunities just from our ageing population in the Riverina. We also have expanding business, especially around agri-tech. The Riverina is exceptionally diverse agriculturally, and lots of businesses are value adding to that. So there's manufacturing here related to and supporting of agriculture. There's also many other emerging industries, and a lot of them need people with electrical engineering, project management skills. Of course, when your population is growing, you need more services. And I think this is the case right around the country. Health, we need specialists in health. We need trained and experienced nurses and all sorts of allied health professionals. We're also seeing that in the very short future time, we're going to have Snowy Hydro 2.0 and construction around the Special Activation Precinct at the Rifle Hub, Riverina Intermodal Freight Terminal in Wagga Wagga, with inland rail coming through. So there's not a lot of construction for inland rail in the Riverina. It's mostly existing rail lines, but there will be construction of this hub, and there will be both project jobs and then we believe more business coming in that will then need more people as well. So business is booming in the Riverina. We are growing, and that's why we need more people. What about you, Megan? How is it in Orana?
Yeah, so for us, I think some of the similar issues. So for us, the issue that we nailed on, and we produced a paper in, I think we worked on it all of 2017 and produced it in 2018 called Bracing for Change. And what we did is we actually looked at the issue of skill shortage, which government likes to talk about, and we actually drilled down and said, well, you know, what are the actual real issues that actually drive the issues around skill shortage? And labour force is very much a part of it, and we did quite a deep analysis on that. And I don't think those issues have changed. If anything, they've been exacerbated by COVID-19. So for us, it is very much around ageing population, but there's two other factors to that for us. So one is the population growth in the region hasn't been as strong as it needs to be. So our workforce has remained static. So the population, we've had a population growth, you know, just positive, but our workforce has remained static. And we have severe, I guess, severe overemployment in terms of before COVID, the regional unemployment rate in our region was 1.9%. So that's driven by having a already very successful region. So we have agriculture, which is in recovery, and there was actually a report this week that said that, you know, production was likely to, I think, triple. So so we've got ag in need, and you know, I heard today that our major meat manufacturer, who has operated as one shift throughout COVID, is likely to go to 2 shifts, and he's advertising really heavily at the moment for all roles. So we have mining in our region, and that's always driven a need for workforce. And most of the mining in our region is actually, we're a live-in community. So we do have a little bit of drive-in, drive-out, but our main mining communities are really, live within the region. So, and mining for us is actually a growth sector. So we have some, 33 very successful mining operations within our region and next door in the Central West, and that includes you with West Wyalong. But we have all of the strategic minerals in New South Wales are actually in my region, and we've got some new mine developments there that will, put some more strain on the workforce when they start their production. Manufacturing is a growth sector for us, so that value added that you talked about, and health is also a really big driver for us. And the health sector's actually done some workforce planning, and right across the sector, the predicted growth over the next 10 years is actually 5,000 new jobs. So, and that's across the spectrum from NDIS and carers right through to allied health and the more, skilled, including, the specialists, etc. So that's a significant thing for us. And then we have those underpinning industries that are really important to us as well. So education and training, the accommodation and food service and hospitality sector, and transport. And in terms of all of those together, compete against each other for labour, but also have, are growing in their own right and are really struggling at the moment in terms of having more jobs for people. And I think, a really current example for us, and we do lots of job monitoring because we're constantly working with all levels of government, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I went on Seek just before this, and last week on Seek there were 563 jobs available in the region. This week there's 610. So, that's the state of play for us at the moment.
Yes, we're also seeing increased job ads, and it's interesting you talked about the in-depth study you've done on your workforce. We're in the midst of that right now. We're working in collaboration with Charles Sturt University on a skills report that we hope to have finished by the end of the year. But we have done the survey, so the initial collection of data. And we did that through COVID, through the initial lockdown. So we tried to delay thinking things would get better, but of course they didn't. So we thought, we'll have to put it out. And what was interesting was that it showed much as we expected and didn't show any real difference to what we were expecting. So what we know is that almost 80% of businesses in our region had trouble employing appropriate staff in the last 12 months, and almost 50% of vacancies in the last 12 months were unfilled. And if you're okay with that, I'll share my screen and just show a graph about some of those vacancies.
We have something similar, and we, from our original work, we've kept it ongoing. We've continued to engage, and we've done some other work, which we'll talk about as well. But I've got something similar that I can show that, and it hasn't changed for us. The issue and problem is not going away.
No, absolutely. So this is a count of respondents, so people responding to the survey, reporting hiring difficulties. So it's not about the number of employees needed, it's about the employers responding. But you can see their hospitality workers are at the top, and we can delve deeper into that information, but we think they're mainly cooks and chefs. And then design, engineering, science and transport professionals. So you mentioned transport as well. We need every type of engineer here. And if you're an electrical specialist, which also knows about robotics, then you're highly desirable. I was speaking to a HR manager in the Western Riverina just the other day who said she could have 10 electricians now. They just can't fill jobs. So there's a huge variety of occupations there. And yes, we mainly need people with the skills and qualifications.
So Peter, Vorster has asked a question about why is there a struggle to fill positions, and I think that for us there's a crux of maybe two things. So one is and in our in-depth analysis, there is a skills lag in Australia. So if we take the issue of, as an example, drivers, which is a critical shortage for us, there's some fundamental, when you break some of these down, there's some fundamental issues going on in terms of the Australian policy environment and what's happening in around training. And some of these shortages are not just unique to our region, they're unique to every region and possibly even internationally. So drivers is an example of that. Drivers is there is an international shortage. And when you actually if I use this as an example, when you break down some of the issues around that, the way a driver gets trained, there's a fundamental issue in terms of the system, in terms of that there's a very heavy investment in that training, in terms of not only the training, but the experience element. And I think that carries across into a number of issues. One of the other issues that we see in our work that we've done with employers is that sometimes they are maybe too optimistic about what they're looking for. So they're not only looking for a skill, but they're looking for Australian work experience. So, and that can be very difficult to come by when you've got a really short, not only skills market, but a short labour pool as well. So, what they're seeking to fulfill just doesn't exist. And then the third element to that, I think, is the issue around workforce mobility in Australia, and the fact that, we've had conversations and we've been engaged with, demographers like Bernard Salt on this issue, but the fact that the Australian workforce is less mobile than it used to be, so they don't go where the work is anymore. And I think a really good example of that is that, the government is talking about unemployment rates reaching 10%, but at the same time talking about having to bring in 200 workers from Vanuatu to pick mangoes in the Northern Territory. And what's missing in that piece is the policy that actually enables and supports unemployed people in metropolitan centres to actually go and pick those mangoes. So, that's one of the pieces that is missing in the policy framework. And but at the same time, what we know is that migrants are prepared to come into regional areas. So we, at RDA Orana, we've worked quite heavily in that space because it's been a short-term answer for us around that. So is that your view as well around why employers are having difficulty recruiting?
Yes, we've just started to look at the free-form answers to questions from our survey and trying to categorise those and work that out a little. But at the moment, yes, sometimes businesses haven't considered whether they could use skilled migration. They haven't considered if they attract someone from another part of Australia, what it is they need to do to support them in the move. You know as well as I do, Megan, that moving even interstate, it's challenging. It's absolutely possible, but it's challenging, especially when you're moving with a young family, which we've also both done. So employers need to be considerate of those things. So I think there's absolutely more employers can do. And part of what we hope to do as a result of our survey is work out how we can support employers more in that way, to consider what can we do to help attract and retain employees. But I think the broader issue is, yes, there's just not enough people in our region, so you have to be looking further afield. I'm always really cautious, though, to ask our employees to also consider who is in the region and to consider whether skill sets are transferable, because I think that's another thing employers sometimes don't do well. sometimes you need someone with specific skills and qualifications for an actual job. Say, for example, a intensive care nurse. So I couldn't go and do that job. There's no way. But there's other times where someone requires a project manager and they have engineering as a criteria, and really perhaps something else could also fit there, and the person isn't an engineer, but they have skills and experience in doing many other things that's closely related to that field and qualification. So so I think we can do better internally as well. But yes, we absolutely have concentrated on trying to find strategies for employers in looking outside our region, because we do firmly believe as well that we need more people here, because that will also help create our own workforce economy, which allows people to stay in a job for 5 years and move to another skilled job within the region. You know, we've loved living in all the different places we've lived around Australia, but we also would have loved to have stayed in some of those places, and often we've had to move for work. So yes, staying in the Riverina is something my family absolutely would love to do. Projects like City of Wagga's drive to be 100,000 assists in that. You need to have local government support, of course, for those projects. The Riverina itself at the moment has about 170,000 people, and Wagga has about 70,000 of those. So, and of course, as a major city, supports a much wider region. But yes, we think there needs to be more skilled people coming in relation to assist with filling those jobs, and also creating a better internal ecosystem.
So I'm not sure if you've got the Q&A open, but Diana asked an interesting question around how do we keep people and their important skills to stay in a region when there's been a major industry shift? And Diana, I think that's actually one of the actual issues, in terms of if they've got skills, and say, for example, I've got jobs in the Orana region, are we actually hanging on to the wrong notion that we need? One, can they transfer their skill into another industry within your own region? But shouldn't we actually also be saying, and this comes back to the ethos of where Australia and how Australia was actually built, in terms of actually having a mobile population that goes where the work is. So, so I think that we need to, and policymakers need to have a freer thinking around and look at incentives that actually encourage people to get off benefits and actually go where the jobs are. That's, I'm taking a little political, stance here, I guess, which we try not to do, but I think that that's one of the fundamental issues that maybe prevents people from looking at moving from a high area of unemployment to an area of low unemployment. And the whole job active, they're very siloed. So, one of my criticisms about that is that, they're good at what they do, but they actually don't look across regions. They don't present jobs to their job active people outside of their regions. And there's no system of support to actually enable somebody to relocate if they are receiving a benefit. So, that's something that I think that needs to change. One of the other questions is, Peter Grow has asked around, do we work with employers around employer of choice? So for us, we work across about 4 different areas in terms of this skilled issues. So employer support is actually critical for us. And for us as an RDA, we focus our engagement on employers. So yes. We do advocacy work with government, but we really focus what we're delivering on employers. And for the past 3 years, we've actually run a series which has both been a one-day conference as well as we've run some little sessions, and we have really worked to deliver some training and education to employers around how they do position themselves as an employer of choice. So we've very much focused on something that has taken a hold in the US, but it hasn't quite taken off here yet, called recruitment marketing. And we've brought in some experts around that. And if anybody wants some more information about that, have a look at an organisation called Smashfly. So Google the term Smashfly. They sell a system, but their actual their work and some of their resources around recruitment marketing are really, really interesting. And what they talk about is one, the cross-transfer between industries, but also understanding who your market is. And one of the examples was that, you know, a manufacturing firm that is looking for trade qualified skilled people, what they did is they actually worked with the company, and they targeted ex-army, ex-defence force people. So they did this in the US. We think that it's very transferable to Australia. Another really good example of that is, you know, at the moment we've been working with one of our major hospitality employers who's telling us that they can't get casual staff. We, you know, which is, you know, something that is happening as a result of COVID and the support mechanisms. So we've talked to them about, and they've just started recruitment, but we've talked to them about actually targeting 17 to 22-year-olds of kids of wealthy parents who actually, the fact that those parents are, you know, earning a reasonable income, and it isn't much these days, I think it's only about 80,000, means that those kids actually don't get access to any support whatsoever, and therefore they're actually a perfect fit for them in terms of actually being able to turn up and wanting to show up for a casual shift in hospitality. So it's really about thinking about who you're targeting and who's going to most respond to your need. And I think that that's possible to do in other industries as well. And that's why I think what we see for some recruiters is that they're doing it instinctively, and they turn to migrant workforce because of that work ethic and that, you know, that known reliability. So which, you know, we say to employers, Australians first, but if you can't find an Australian, we sort of support them through that pathway of migration. And the work that we've done in that space, you know, we are one of the regions in Australia that has a designated area migration agreement. It hasn't been as successful as we'd like it to be, and the main reason for that is that it's still a very expensive visa for an employer. So the Skilling Australia levy that is applied to that visa and to the 494, which is a sponsored visa, a disincentive for employers, especially if they don't feel or see the benefit of where that Skilling Australia levy is going. So again, a system issue for us. So
I'd agree with that, Megan. We have so many employers who do so much work in the skills sphere anyway, especially with our young people, and employing them as apprenticeships or traineeships, yet they also need those highly skilled workers to be supervisors. And sometimes the only way they can do that is through skilled migration. And I agree, they feel like they're getting a double whammy from the government in relation to that levy. So it's definitely what we hear all the time. I suppose so. We're moving into really what we do to try and assist, aren't we? So, do you want to talk about the youth? Well, you were talking about youth in relation to casual work.
Yeah. So I mean, for us, because there's lots. One of the things when we called our report Bracing for Change, and the original title of it was Unraveling the Web, because it is so complex and there's so many different players when we talk about employment and labour. at all levels, both all levels of government as well as then the external providers, as well as, you know, the actual employers themselves and the workers. And it's a really tangled web, and some of the issues are really easy to nut out and others aren't. From a youth perspective, I think one of the things that we decided to do was, so we have a very low unemployment of, you know, as I said, in December it was 1.9%. I think we'll probably creep up to 4.5% as a result of COVID, still a lot lower than the national average. Our youth unemployment isn't really an issue for us, but so where we've focused on is engaging with careers advisors in schools, talking to them about the local opportunities. And again, one of the issues that I see that happens at a school level, and there's some research that says that children's choices around a career path are influenced by parents, and most parents will push their kids into uni. But one of the other fundamental issues is that often a careers day at a school will actually be all about the universities, and it's the universities. So if you go to a careers day, 90% of the displays will be universities. There'll be very little actual employer or industry reps actually there showing pathways. So, and that's about resources and about structure of the industries themselves. So a small employer can't avail themselves to a careers day because they're working to actually present the job opportunities. So what we've decided to do is we attack it through the careers advisors. We've worked with Department of Education on their training days with careers advisors, so where they bring them in to Dubbo to do career development. We actually go ourselves. We take some of the GTOs, so the group training organisations, and we also take employers, and we have that conversation with careers advisors about the job opportunities within the region that aren't necessarily all about university, but we talk about where the jobs are and what they can do to help prep kids, one, for that first job, because one of that was some feedback that we got from employers is, you know, they will employ anybody who's had that first job, so it's critical. And so, you know, we talk to the careers advisors about that, but then we also talk to them about all the non-university opportunities that we have as well.
Absolutely. We run a similar program. I'll just share my screen for a moment to show how it all fits in. There you go. Is that working? So down on the right-hand side there, Grow Our Own. That's all about our young people. That's all about connecting them to employers in our region. And we've presented on at SEGRA a number of times on Grow Our Own, and actually won the People's Choice Award back in 2017 as a new idea. Peter Crew asked a question about local community, about attracting and retaining. Well, this program came from our Western Riverina business community. They said we need to work out a way how to keep our young people here because we're losing all that young talent. So that's what this program's about. It's about primarily connecting the young people to employers and then helping them find the training pathways that both fit the young person and the employer. And yes, you're right, it does start with schools, careers advisors and parents, because if the parents see the factory or the cotton gin or whatever down the road as just being menial labour and they don't understand the complexity of careers actually available within that opportunity, they're going to tell their young person, their child, not to pursue that career. So we really need to debunk those myths. So we're spending quite a lot of time working on that strategy, and our employers have been really embracing of it to say, yes, we need this younger generation. And where, of course, you can't stop anyone from leaving a community. If they want to go to a city, that's fine. But letting them understand that there are real opportunities here. One of the real success stories as part of Grow Our Own has been gap year programs. So employers taking young people on, giving them an opportunity to perhaps to do a certificate through TAFE, so they're getting a qualification as well as having real adult job experience for a year. And then they can go off and do whatever they want, or they can perhaps be employed within that business on an ongoing basis, or we've seen young people poached from those opportunities to other businesses and stay in the region and go on to quite high level positions. So in the short time that this program's been running, about 4 years now, it's had amazing success, and we'd love to find more funding for it. We've had strong partnership with Department of Education the last couple of years, but that's now folded. At the moment, that role in our organisation to run Grow Our Own is funded completely by industry, so by our local employers. So it shows how important it is for them. But it's absolutely a piece of the puzzle. But as we said earlier, you also need those highly skilled and experienced employees to supervise the young people coming through, whether they're doing an apprenticeship or a traineeship, or if they're just a young person in the workforce. And we've found that skilled migration plays a really important part in that solution, and our employers are saying that all the time. So I was asked a question again in regards to nursing, and well, aren't the universities locally training enough nurses if the hospitals can't get enough nurses? Well, there's only so many positions for graduate nurses. There also needs to be highly experienced nurses to supervise those graduate nurses. And if we can't get them from within our region, then skilled migration is often a solution. Do you want me to go on, or do you want to talk more about skilled migration, Megan?
I think one of the things that and I just saw, there's a comment here about, that the challenges in Victoria at the moment are very different, and they are, and I don't envy in terms of what's happening down there, and particularly with the shutdowns. But through our work on our designated area migration agreement, we actually did join up with quite a few regions. So we worked with we worked with a group in South Australia. We worked with Warrnambool in Victoria, who also progressed to Dharma at the same time. We had Kalgoorlie in Western Australia, and there was a group in Cairns that we were working with. And I think one of the things that really struck me, and it's one of the pieces of work that we've done, is that there is a higher challenge if you are actually in an inland area. And one of the things that we've really thought about, and again, this is kind of filtered by some of the work that we've done with Bernard Salt, is that when you look at regional, what's termed regional population growth in Australia, it's very coastal oriented. So, it's very much, and it's eastern seaboard oriented as well. So, so if you are in an inland area, the challenge is even greater. And one of the things that Bernard challenged us on was when we started to talk about, the factors around population and population growth and what the success factors are in terms of driving that. He said to me, look around Australia and tell us where that growth, identify other areas and look at what they've done. And it's actually very difficult to find in Australia. So Shepparton is maybe the closest to that, but I would argue that Shepparton is so close to Melbourne that, it's nearly a false thing, because it's got that reach within the Melbourne catchment, whereas somewhere like Wagga or Dubbo or a Burke doesn't, or Broken Hill doesn't actually have that access to the metropolitan market, which makes it a lot more difficult. And our challenges are different. And one of the things that we've been talking to the Commonwealth Government on, and even to RAI on, is that we think that there needs to be a differential policy between inland areas and coastal areas. And, you know, that goes right into the tax system and the old days of, you know, when you lived in a, you know, what was a remote area, and there was a great tax incentive to actually for choosing to live in one of those areas. So, you know, we've done a submission to government on that in terms of, you know, maybe it's time to actually review those. And there was a review last year that we put a submission on in terms of that, that even those remote areas need to maybe be broadened and the boundaries need to change to these inland areas that actually are a distance away from a metropolitan area, because we, you know, that's a fundamental issue for us.
Yeah, I agree. Those strategies should be looked at. The other way we've tried to combat that is to market what we have here in our region, and that's through our Country Change program, where our local government areas, our councils, buy into the marketing of that. So it's marketing the whole Riverina region, and just showing people what's here and showing people that we don't have two heads, and we actually have lots of shops and beautiful parklands and great coffee shops, and all the things that people in cities or suburbs have too. Like I don't need to go other places, but I still can. That's the other thing. It's really not that far. We're lucky here in the Riverina that we're halfway between Melbourne and Sydney, and there's actually a lot of travel in both directions. Not normally, of course, there's not right now, but we hope there will be again soon. So yes, that's a real benefit of being in our location, but it's that old you know, problem, as you mentioned, Megan, that once you cross the Great Divide, people that haven't been out past the mountains seem to think there's nothing there, and that's not the case at all. So we have a big push too to encourage internal migration, what you mentioned before, encouraging people to move to our region. Although we never suggest people come without a plan. We think they should be moving with a job or with a business idea, or, you know, something in place. We don't think generally just up and moving without that solution in mind is a good idea for anyone. I would not do it. But we really encourage people to talk to us about what's here and to come and visit. And that's what we've been doing with Country Change. We've been running Country Change weekends and events where instead of taking something to the city, we've been encouraging people to come and visit these communities, stay for a weekend, talk to the real estate agents, talk to some major employers, see what's here, get a feel for the place. Because the other thing about our region that I think's fantastic is it's really diverse. The landscape, the different businesses, the different farming types. So we go from broadacre to intensive horticulture. We've got mountains to the hay plains. So it's really very diverse, and it's also diverse in where you can live in regards to housing types. You want to live in one of the cities. We have two cities. We have Griffith and Wagga Wagga, and live in a main street apartment. You can. If you want to live in a modern suburban house, just like you would in Western Sydney, you can. If you want to live on a lifestyle block, you can. And if you want to go farming, which some people might want to do, then there's opportunities to buy a big productive farm as well, or to work for one of those large productive farms. So there's so much available, and I think people can be quite narrow-minded as to what we have in the region, and it's a big country, so it's hard to get around and see it all.
Yeah. So one of the things that we both wanted to touch on was the role of migrants in our communities. And it is an important part for us of our migration strategy, and the policy environment for migration at the moment is maybe a little negative. And I think maybe mainly inland areas where we do have more jobs and people, it's the wrong attitude to have around migration, because it's been so important to us within our region. And I think for us, there's another element to it in terms of that often when we talk about migrants for regional areas and around work, it's very focused on skilled migration. So it's around those migrants actually having a skill. But in our region, they've been incredibly important for us for some of the non-skilled work. So my meat works that I have here, and I had two for a short while, and is they wouldn't have been able to operate without their migrant labour force. And that's both, through a number of different systems. So, what I'm seeing at the moment is the migrant labour force is also for us filling an incredible need that we have in our community sector, particularly around NDIS and aged care in terms of that community care role. So, which is, it's heading towards a skilled role, and we're hoping to actually include that community care in our Dharma review that we're doing at the moment. So, and then there's, some of the other jobs. And I think for us, because our unemployment rate has been so incredibly low, until we get Australians recognising what the opportunities are and willing to shift into our areas, then we have to actually turn to migrants who actually are willing to live here. And one of the things that we have implemented, and we've implemented quite successfully in our role as an RCB, which is a regional certifying body, is that we actually give a preference to those who, in terms of sponsorship and recommending them for sponsorship, to those that have actually come into our community and can show us community connection. So absolutely, we give a preference to those migrants who show a commitment to us. If they're in one of our rural areas, they go to the top of our list because they've been incredibly important to our rural areas. And that's not just from a workforce perspective, but also from the fact that when they come in on a skilled visa, they generally are able to bring family members as well. So that's about community resilience and actually rebuilding some of our smaller rural populations as well. So, and we've actually had some really good success stories of that. But I think one of the things again is this recruitment marketing of like to like. So it's, Nepalese as an example do really well in our community because they come out of a rural environment coming into a rural environment. So that's that recruitment marketing of actually understanding what will work in terms of, somebody coming out of an urban centre may not be, unless they're seeking a real lifestyle change, may not be successful in settling into a community like Burke or Walgett. So, understanding, one of the other pieces that we do is understanding the infrastructure that they need in order to support them. That was triggered by a conversation with a doctor that I had on a plane one day, in terms of that he was here on a visa, but he was going to, when his visa expired, go to Frankston. And the reason that he was going back to Frankston was that's where he could practice his religion. So, and he couldn't do that in New South Wales. So,
that's really interesting, Megan, and there's similar conversations we're having about the pilot program we're working on with Multicultural New South Wales, and that's all about secondary refugee resettlement. So moving refugees who are interested in relocating from Western Sydney to our communities, and we're firstly targeting two of our LGAs, Leeton Shire and Temora Shire. And it's really about that. Yes, people being able to have a place of worship, absolutely. people being able to have support systems around them. And that's in regards to health, but just as well as people in the community, they can ask if they have a problem. So we're working through that at the moment. We're not inviting those people specifically just yet, but we're working through the strategies and what we need to put in place for that to happen. But it's really important. The question again earlier about how important is it to have supportive communities. Absolutely important. You couldn't do any of this unless the communities want it. And
that's both formal and informal, I think. So one of the things since we've been really looking at this piece is what we've seen is the actual informal connections that are really important as well. So, you know, an example is that there is a go-to lady based in Wellington for the Filipino community who has been here for a few years and knows everything, but she's known to the Filipino community as the go-to. And so she's a very informal, you know, connection that will help them embed, and, you know, she helps them into jobs as well. So it's really interesting seeing that layer that's happening as we also get more people, you know, more migrants into the region.
Yep, that's right. And there's a question here that I think also relates to the question earlier about preferred employers. Have you tackled the issue of work opportunities for partners and other family members? Yes, we have a little, but it's also something that there could be more done with. But a number of our preferred employers, the people who do a really good job, absolutely do this. And I've said in a number of open forums, it's not a conflict of interest if everyone declares it openly. This person's just been employed in our business, and his wife or partner or whoever, or her wife or partner, or whatever way it works, it can be either way, is looking for a job, and these are their skills and qualifications. Who's got one? Like, that should be happening more. Absolutely needs to happen. We're trying lots of different ways to get those hidden jobs as well out there, because we know in regional communities not all jobs are advertised. One way we've been trying to fix that problem is by putting up a free for employers or potential employees job site called Jobs Riverina. That's only for jobs within the Riverina. But it's free for anyone to post their jobs. It takes a grab from a lot of other places, as well as we encourage employers to put their jobs directly on there. But we really want that used more, because it's then a way for people looking to move to the Riverina region to look for jobs, as well as what we're talking about, that internal ecosystem for people that are looking for another job within the region to look. So we fund that at RDA Riverina. It does cost us an amount, but we think it's really important, and our committee has decided to continue to do it. But we really want more people posting their jobs on there. It requires a staff member to look at it and to check that jobs haven't sneaked in there that aren't in our region, but otherwise it's pretty easy for us to manage, and it's just a business logging in there as a user and posting their jobs.
Marie made a comment, Marie Cameron's made a comment about her experience of living in regional communities, and I think one of the biggest challenges, personal challenges that I've had, is that I'm like Marie. You know, I think I've pretty much lived most of my life in a regional area, and, you know, I start my bio with I'm passionate about regional areas. But so the biggest challenge in that, though, is that, you know, I know what's great about living in a regional area, but I'm not selling to me. You know, we have to sell this to the people that aren't ourselves. So we have to sell those benefits to other people. I know that, you know, but I think what you said, my shifts have been triggered by by needing to, you know, I was chasing a career when we were doing most of our shifts. And so, you know, every shift that I did was associated with a move up my career ladder. And that was maybe one of the negatives for me in terms of the jumping around. You know, it's quite an expensive exercise to go from Townsville to Darwin or from Mount Isa, you know, to Townsville type thing. So, but I think that that there are tremendous benefits. And one of the things that we see, that we've certainly seen in the, you know, I was involved in the Evo Cities program in the early days, and I think that it's, you know, it's played its part in terms of presenting those urban cities and the lifestyle that's readily available, is the that there are some really good opportunities in regional Australia. But what we see, what's been important to us from an Australian perspective, is what I call the returner. So they're people that, you know, have either gone to boarding school and university and worked the early part of their career away, but they come back with to build their family in our community. So that's been really, you know, one of the really important mechanisms for us from an Australian perspective. But I think the bit broader challenge is, at the moment, in terms of the jobs that we have, is actually getting those that don't have any connection to regional Australia to actually even put us down as an option in terms of living and working here. And we do things like video campaigns and we do social media campaigns, but you know, we work with employers, and that presenting the jobs is really important, but we're still not getting quite the cut through. And I think there's that fundamental issue that sits behind around government policy and incentives for, you know, choosing to go where the work is.
Wow, we've nearly done an hour. That's crazy. I'd just like to comment on Marie's comment too. I agree, Marie. I lived in the Pilbara for 6 years with my family, and we had a great time. And I feel extremely privileged that my children got to go to school with First Australians and experience their culture so easily, and also with all the, as you say, migrant families who live in places like that, often in mining communities, and it's just very, very normal. And I think we do need to work on educating people who are interested in making a move on what to expect, and on how to engage with community, and how to join clubs or sporting teams or whatever, because often if you live in a city, your job is your life. Now, we have time. We can do other things, and maybe it's just educating people that they're going to have to do other things and connect with community in other ways as well.
Yeah. Look, it's been fantastic. As you've noticed, the hour has just flown by. Great to hear your experiences, the importance of data, so that you have facts behind what you're doing, and obviously you are both passionate about regional Australia. So thank you very much for your time. I'd just like to advertise our next webinar, which is next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And we're very thrilled to be having John Tamani speaking at that webinar. He's an Australian, although he works in London at the moment. He's an Australian who wrote some of the seminal papers on place-based regional economic development. And so we're delighted that he's coming from London via Zoom to talk to us next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Just in the last couple of minutes, Megan and Rachel, I'll give you each a chance to make a closing comment.
Well, I think I've said heaps, and I want to say thank you very much for, you know, for letting us be a part of this. I think it's a really important conversation to have. I would, you know, RAI have been, Peter's made a comment about RAI, and they've been incredibly important to us in our work, and we've partnered with them and we collaborate with them in a couple of different fronts in terms of the work that they're doing. I see their role as being really important around some of that regional awareness and attitude change, but I think that regionally and locally we have a responsibility to do more in terms of actual jobs. So I think one of the things is that government tends to look very linearly at issues, but you know, it's a great big ecosystem, and We can't go RAI doing that and just leave it. There's still a hell of a lot of work that has to get done on the ground, and that's, you know, part of the role that we fulfil, both working with employers as well as you know, the advocacy work around how policies actually work for us within a region.
Yep, absolutely. Solving the problem of more jobs and people is not easy. It must be done on a number of different levels with many different strategies. The questions that people have asked today about, are you trying this and are you trying that? Yes, yes, and yes. We would love to try more of all of that. It often comes down to manpower and money, but yes, collaboration can help too. And as Megan said, working with another organisation that that works at a slightly different level, like RAI, can really help. But we also need that local approach to promoting our region and to advocating for the needs of our region, because the needs for us are different even to Orana's needs, and very different to, say, coastal regions' needs.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.